Hi everyone, let's talk about server actions. Server actions are an upcoming feature in Next.js. They allow for a pattern that's really cool in a lot of different ways for web developers. Let me demonstrate. But so here I have, I'm going to create an empty Next.js project. I'm just going to add Tailwind for some basic styling. TypeScript, yes, ESLint, yes. Nope. We're gonna stick to the defaults. I'm gonna go with the app router. So the reason I'm making this video is because of two reasons. Number one, I think the way server actions are being demonstrated over different blogs and posts are not the most optimal in showing how they can be used and how convenient they can make development. Secondly, there's a bunch of gotchas when it comes to using server actions. It's easy to, for example, compromise your security or even run into a bunch of unexpected errors when using something like this. And I want to go over them with examples to show what I believe is the best way to utilize this feature. It's taking some time. Okay, now we're up. So let me actually open this project up. Awesome. Now, the first thing we're gonna do is enable server actions in our next.config.js. The reason for this is this feature is still in alpha. So what you're gonna have to do is go inside your next config right over here and add experimental and then set server actions to true. We're gonna save this file, get rid of it, and now we're ready to demonstrate. Let's go through the example in the talks first, because I want to talk about why that's not the best example for demonstrating server actions, and then we'll go over a couple of use cases with how they can be used best. So over here, what we're gonna actually, let's implement something very similar to this. So we have a server function over here. Let's go inside app page. We're gonna get rid of all of this, and I'm just gonna write hello, open this up, and we can go back here and just go at localhost 3000, and we have our hello over here. Pretty cool. We're gonna get rid of the terminal over here, and now this is a server component by default. I'm gonna create a bunch of other components to demonstrate how server actions can be used differently. Let's do the example given in the docs first, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new file over here. We're going to write doc example, and over here I just want to export default function doc example return something over here, and so here's like the gist of this example. What you can do is create this function called add item, and we have a form over here that has a button that's supposed to add the item. And what you're doing is when you use the use server tag, you basically are allowing this function to become a server action. What that means is you can run a function that's present in your server code directly from your client code. And in this case, we're not even directly calling the function. We're just attaching it to the action attribute in our form. So this example is pretty cool because the action over here, like this function, is gonna get called with the data in the form even when JavaScript has been disabled in your browser or in your app, right? So this makes it pretty cool because you're able to essentially make requests or run code in your server, trigger code in your server without writing any JavaScript on your client side. So let's actually do something really similar over here. I'm going to go ahead and create a server action like so. And what I'll do is I don't want to actually get into this stuff. I'll just actually remove this. And what I'm going to do is do a console log hello from server action, right? And we're going to be able to see this log in our server logs. And over here, I just want to or actually let me just keep it at this, right? We're gonna go inside this div and add the form exactly like this. Okay, the other thing I want to do is, so instead of saying add to cart, I'm just gonna say trigger server action, right? And so this is actually a really simple example, but the idea is, for example, actually let me turn this into something that's more relatable. Let's say this is the like button over here, and what you can do in this case is, let's say this is the like action, this is the like action as well. What you can do is, apart from console logging, is you can actually go in your DB and because this code runs on the server side, you can actually directly just interact with your database, and you can actually update the number of likes you have in your DB for any post or anything like that. And you can simply say likes +1, right? And this is gonna run perfectly well, and I'm gonna demonstrate this and more in just a bit. But first, what I want to do is save this, go back to our app, and oh, we haven't included this here. So let's actually doc example, and we're gonna get rid of this, right? Now if I click like, and if I go over here, you can see that the server the function is running on the server side, right? Over here, like there's an inherent advantage to you being able to call server functions that are present in your server side code directly from your client, because typically, if you wanted to do something like this, you would have to, number one, create an API endpoint. Then number two, send a request to that API endpoint, handle that request over there, then do whatever you wanted to do in your server side code. Apart from that, you would have to make sure your API endpoints are healthy, they're secure, they're protected, things like that. Now over here, this is a pretty simple example, and this sort of example is present in a lot of different blog posts, etc. Recently, Theo made a really good YouTube video about how this pattern is really dangerous if when using server actions. I'm going to just actually demonstrate that. So let's actually go over to our component over here, and let's say we have a secret over here, and this is a server function. All of your code over here is being run on the server side, because this runs on your server. You get the final HTML which is being sent to your client, right? So let's say you have like some secret over here, right? And the idea is, if you're using this value inside your server action, so let's say we're using it over here, and I'm gonna just say console log using secret, and I'm just gonna say secret over here, right? If you're doing this, it's not intuitive in a lot of ways that this secret is gonna get revealed on the client side, and I'm gonna show you how that happens. So let's save this. Let's go back, refresh this once, and we're gonna inspect what happens inside our form. So we're gonna go inside this div, we're gonna go inside this form, and over here, as you can see, like the values that you declared outside of your server action, for example this secret, is present inside the HTML over here. And that's because we were using this variable inside our server actions, and that's not immediately apparent in an example like the one I was showing, which is why this is not really, like, you would have to be really careful not using anything that's not supposed to be sent on client side within the server action if you're doing it like this. Now there's a better way to do this, and which is my preferred way, and the way to do that is you can actually take the server action and extract it out of this component and put it in a separate file. The way you do that typically is, we're going to go into our app folder, create a new file. I'm going to call this actions.ts. You can call it whatever you want, it doesn't matter. And over here, let's actually paste this all the way over here. And what we're going to do is take this use server, put it at the top of the file, right? And let's actually like take this over here as well. Awesome. And now we have this server action over here. This is part of your server code. This code is going to get executed on your server. But the cool thing, the really useful thing about server actions is that you can actually call that function from anywhere. You can call that function from a server component like this, where you're essentially attaching it as an action to a form element. And let me demonstrate this once. So we're gonna have to import like action. Oh, okay. Let 1 second. So we're gonna have to export this. Now I can actually import this like action from our actions file, save this, go back over here. And now if I go inside our form, this doesn't really have that secret value anymore, right? But the button still works. If I click this a bunch of times, go back to our server logs, you can see that the function is still running over here, right? The idea is now, now that your action is over here, we're actually, what NextJS does behind the scenes is that it attaches an action ID to this form, right? What that does is that actually enables, so NextJS behind the scenes creates the API endpoint as well as like handles sending the request to that API endpoint for you so as to trigger your function which has been declared as a server action. We can actually see that over here. If you let me actually click this a bunch of more times, we can see that there's a request being sent over here. Request is being sent to localhost 3000. It's a post request. Inside the payload, you can see we have the action ID present, which allows NextJS to identify the function that's being called once this payload is being received. And you can actually pass in any number of parameters that are present in inside the form, right? So now that's pretty cool. Basically, we had to create no endpoint. We had to send no requests directly from our code, but NextJS is handling all of that just by importing a server action and putting it inside inside a form element. So now that's pretty cool, but I'm gonna actually get into a better demonstration of what this enables you to do. So let's actually go back to our app directory, create a new file. I'm gonna call this one just client component .tsx. Export default client component. And in order to make this a client component, I'm just gonna declare use client, return an empty div over here. And let's actually go over what happens, or let's actually go over what happens when you use server actions instead of the old way of fetching things from server, mutating things on the server, and so on and so forth. So typically, what you would want, let's say we have, I'm gonna code a really simple example over here. So what I want to do is, I'm gonna say we have like some saved items, right? And what I want to do is basically list all of the saved items below this. So declare this, and I'm gonna say we have items somewhere here, items set items use state, and this is going to be an empty array for now. And over here, what we can do is items.map and item over here, and I'm gonna say li key equals to item.id. So we're gonna assume every item has an ID, and over here I'm just gonna write item.name. And we're gonna also have to define TypeScript is gonna get mad, so we're gonna have to define some types for all of these. So what I'm gonna do is I'll actually go in my project directory and create a new file, and I'm gonna call this types. I'm gonna call this types.d.ts. And over here, I'm just gonna declare a simple interface, export interface item. I'm gonna set an ID to number and then a name that's a string. And now we can go back to our client component and just declare this as an array of item. And we're gonna have to import item from our types, just like that. Okay, so now what I want to do is two things. Number one, I want to list all of the items I have over here. And next, I want to actually add an item. So I'm going to declare an input over here. And below this, I want a button that says add item. And in order for this to work, we're going to have to declare another state. So let's say inp set input use state and empty string over here. You can go back over here, get rid of this value in on change e dot target dot value. Awesome. Now we're here. I'm gonna get an handle. Click. Now there's two things I want to do. Number one, const handle click. I want this to be an async function and essentially save items in DB over here. And the other thing is getting all of the items. So just to keep things simple, I'm gonna create a use effect over here and get items from DB over here. Now typically you would have to create API endpoints for both of these things: saving an item, getting an item, getting all of the items from your DB, and then you would essentially send requests to those APIs from here and here. But with server actions, we can actually do that in an extremely simple manner. And what we can do is basically go to actions, and I'm going to create two actions over here. So let's start with export const get items async. Just for this demonstration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this database of sorts in a JSON file on the server, just to keep things simple. The same example works with any kind of database or any kind of server that you're sending data to. But for now, what I'm going to just say is, let's say let raw data is fs, and we're gonna have to import fs over here, read file sync. I'm just gonna call this db.json. Let's actually go ahead and say import fs from fs over here. So now what I want to do is just say let db as json.parse raw data dot to string, and then I can just return db.items. For saving items, what I'm gonna do is just say export const save item async, and we're gonna actually just simply, let me copy this and then just say copy this as well, and then okay, let me actually just go ahead and create a db.json just so we have like a structure in mind. So I'm going to create a new file right over here, and this is the file that our code is going to access when it tries to open or write to a db.json file. So we're here, what I'll just say is we have this object. I'm going to say I'm actually, let me just say items over here, right? And this is going to be an array, and each item is going to have something like this. So ID and a name, apple, right? And we can save this, and this is actually good enough. We can go back to our actions file, and now what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to get the length db.items.length, and then I'm going to say db.items is everything inside db.items followed by a new object. And the reason I took this length over here is because I want to actually have a ID at auto increment. So I want this at n+1, and then a name. And the cool thing over here that we're going to get into is we can actually, not only can we call functions on the server from our client side code, we can actually pass data into those functions as well. So right now I'm going to say accept name, which is a string over here. I'm just going to set, we don't even have to write it, but I'm going to set name to name, right? And once this is done, we're going to just say fs.write file sync and db.json json.stringify db. Done. Okay, now that this is done, we can, let's actually go back to our client component and implement these functions over here. So in order to get items from our database on the server, all we have to do is simply call let items, or wait, this is okay, let's actually not get into async await. Let me just write get items, right? Import this from actions and then just call the val and set items to val, not val, oh yeah, just val, because we're already returning. If I go back over here, we're actually returning db.items, which is an array, which is what we want over here. So cool. In order to save an item, all you have to do is just say await save item, and this needs a name, right? TypeScript coming in handy as usual. And once you're done with this, what all you want to do is actually refetch the item so that the list can get refreshed on the UI. So I'm just going to copy this over here, paste this over here, and we're done. Now let's go back to over here. Okay, first of all, we're gonna go in our page and we're gonna import the client component over here, save it. Now we have the following things. What I would like to do over here, number one, just add some gap. Okay, so we have as you can see, we have Apple over here, which is like the first item inside our database that we initialized in our JSON file. And if we actually clear out this network tab over here, refresh this, you can see that we actually sent a request over here. Chrome right now does not render the response well, but this is the exact request being sent in order to get items over here from, and this get items is, as you know, a server action. It's a function on our server side of code. We are simply calling it from within our component just by importing it, right? All of the requests and the API endpoints are being handled by NextJS by default, and I believe that's a really powerful pattern to get hold of. Next, we can actually just write something like, okay, let me actually just add some styling over here. Class name, text black. Okay, now we can, yeah, we can type now. Banana. I'm going to click add item, and notice over here in the network tab, it's going to send a request. So, and it added banana over here as well. The first request over here, as you can see, sends the value banana to the server. Server receives that value, calls the function save item with that value passed in as the name. The function stores this new item inside our database, which is inside our JSON file, and then sends a new request to get all of the items that are saved inside the database. And this function returns apple and banana. And we can also actually just open up our db.json file and inspect that we have indeed added a new item by the name of banana over here, and we can see it over here. We can actually go ahead and keep adding things like this. So let's say car, bus, and as you can see, this works pretty well. So this entire pattern, all of your CRUD operations, you can actually do them without creating an API endpoint and all of the code required to send requests, manage the responses, things like that. You can simply call the functions that are present in your server code, give them values, and that pretty much gets the job done. And that's really powerful. Now let's go a little bit deeper into how we can further use these server actions. So this was one example where we were basically, a very simple example, we are just passing a simple string over here. The other way to use them, and I'm going to actually create a new function, a new component over here. So let's go in our app directory, create a new file. I'm going to say client, I'm going to actually call it client form.txx. Export default function, client form, create an empty div over here, use client. And in order to separate these out, let me just add some headings over here. So I'm going to say client component simple example. And over here, what I want to do is basically okay, so what I want to do is do something similar to the example in the documentation, which is using server actions within a form. And what I want to do over here is basically create a form, right? And over here, or Actually, let's do it this way. I'm going to demonstrate this to you in two different ways. Number one, let's talk about file uploads, right? You can pass in strings, numbers, whatever to these functions, but can you also upload files? The answer is yes, and I'm going to show you how. So let's declare a state for the file input, and we're going to say use state, and for types we're just going to say file or null, and import use state over here. Next, what I want to do is basically add a heading over here that says file input example, right? I'm gonna add an input over here. Okay, and over here what I want to do is say on change I want to execute this function if e.target.files set file to e.target.files 0, and this input has to be type file, and if we have selected a file we can actually also just display it using this simple code. We're gonna just say file.name, and once we've added or selected a file from our system, we can actually just upload it. And for that I'm just going to create a button that says upload over here on click, and we're just going to say handle click, right? Go over here and declare handle click async, and over here what you want to do is create a form data object, form data new form data. Now we're just gonna use this form data, append the file to it, and we're just gonna assume the file is over here, and then we're gonna actually call the server action from here. And in order for that to work, let's actually first go ahead and declare the server action over here. So let's go to actions.ts over here. I'm gonna say export const save file equals to async, and we have e, which is going to be form data, and this is what we're going to do. So first we're going to have to extract the file. So the way to do that is just say e.get file, because we added the file with this key over here. We're going to also just say as file. Now we have the file over here. I'll actually also just console log it, but what you want to do is, let's say we're gonna do something really simple. We'll just save this file on our server. So the way to do that is just do an await fs.append file, and we're gonna call it, let's say saved.png. We're gonna assume this is an image just for demonstration purposes. And what you want to do is buffer.from data Yeah, I think this is about right. We're gonna see if this throws any error, but if you have any error, we're just gonna say console.log error saving file, and sort of it. That is pretty much all you would need. Okay, this data, okay, there's another thing you need to do. So this data is actually gonna be constructed like this. So these are, okay, array buffer, yes, I think this should do the job. These details are not important over here. What I'm trying to demonstrate is you can actually upload files by just calling server actions in this manner, and you can do whatever you want with the file over here. Over here in our example, we're just gonna save it in our file as a file over here. Let's go back to client form, right? And over here, all you want to do is just say save file. Actually, await save file, and we need form data. We're gonna pass form data, save, go to, we're gonna close all of these extra components over here. We don't need this, we don't need this. I'm gonna go over here and just say client form, save it, go back. Now, as you can see, we have a file input, and all I'm gonna do is select an image, open. We have the image over here, and I'm gonna clear the network tab over here, then click upload, and as you can see, a request has been sent. It contains a file, and it's being sent to our server, and we can actually go back to our code base over here, and we can see that we have a saved.png file, and this file is the exact same file that we uploaded. So this is just to demonstrate how easy it is to upload files using server actions instead of like your regular APIs. And the other thing that I want to cover over here is you can obviously use you can attach this action to a form element, as I showed you in the very first example that we took from the Next.js docs. But we can also actually do that within server components, and this is not something that I really love right away, but I can see this being a really powerful pattern in the future. Right now, it's not exactly in a state where you would want to use it in your apps, but I'm going to demonstrate the pattern right away. So what you can do with server components, let's actually create one over here. So new file, let's say server component.tsx, and all I'm gonna do is just say async function server, wait, export default async function server component, and since this is a server component, you can actually make things really easy for you, because you can simply, you can directly call any server functions right from within this component, and it's gonna get executed on the server, so you don't have to deal with security issues, for example, while fetching your data, right? The data is being fetched right on the server, and it's gonna get filled in inside your HTML over here, and then it's being sent to the client. this is pretty neat. But let's say you're actually fetching the items from an API, right? And what I want to do over here is actually use the fetch API, and there's a reason for it. Let me just type this out. So await fetch, I'm just gonna say http localhost 3000, and we don't have an API yet, but let me just write /API/items, and then we're gonna define some options over here, and the first option is gonna be cache, and we're gonna set this to no cache. And the other option, which is really important for this example, is tags, and I'm just gonna add a tag that says items. So no cache over here simply means that there is going to be no cache when fetching this response. Typically NextJS gives you options to automatically cache your responses in order to make your app faster, if you think that's a good idea for the kind of API that you have. But over here we're gonna just go ahead and deal with this. What we're gonna have to do next is just say const data await response.json, and over here we can just say items, which is this is data.items. I'm gonna have to import items from over here, and that's pretty cool. I'm just gonna declare a header over here that says server component example, and we can actually just go ahead and let me close this, go back to our component, and we can actually just deal with like all of this till here. Paste this out, and over here what I want to do is, instead of having a button with an on click etc., I'm just going to create a form element. Oops, form, get rid of this. Over here we're going to just say input, and we're going to have a button that says submit. This button simply has type submit, and the input, we're just going to give it a name attribute. It's going to say name. Pretty cool. Now what I want to do is attach an action to this form, and this is how we're going to actually save a new item within our database. For fetching, let's actually implement the fetch part first. So we don't have an API like this right away, but we can simply create this within our app directory. So I'm just gonna create a new file over here that says API/items/route.ts, and if you have route over here, you can basically so what you can do is you can define a function over here, export const get, and this function is essentially going to handle a get request at /API/items route. So request, and this is going to do the same thing that we were doing in our get items function right over here, except over here, yeah. Wait, let me import this. Import fs from fs. All right, except that we can't actually return our items like this. We're gonna have to wrap them in next response object. So the way you do that is simply by importing next response from next/server. Over here what you can do is simply say return next response dot JSON, and we can pass an object over here. I'm just gonna actually just say db.items, straight simple. Now this is going to return our database, and it's gonna have an items array inside of it that we're gonna get inside of our items variable. We can actually use that to populate everything on the UI, send this UI back to our client. Pretty clean. This pattern is really clean compared to what we had before in terms of fetching data. But over here, what we cannot do is attach functions to on-click events or input events or anything like that, because this is a server component, so we can't really do that. The only thing we can do in a server component in order to trigger a server action is attach it to a form element. And the way we're going to do that is, so we're going to have to create a separate server action over here that handles this forms submission. And in order to do that, we're gonna simply go to our actions file over here, and what I'm gonna do is create another function. So export const save item form and async. This is also gonna take, just like our save file function, it's gonna take form data as a parameter. And over here, what you want to do is const name, and we can simply get the name by saying name over here, and then we can actually convert this into string. And it's good to always check if you have received a value over here, just to make sure your APIs or your function is not being compromised or is not turning into unnecessary errors. We're just going to check for name. If name is not there, we're going to return. Otherwise, we can actually copy everything from here, save items, all the way to this area. Awesome. So this is going to save like an item inside our database, and it's gonna, we can actually trigger this from over here. So save item for importing it from the actions file, save, go back over here, go back over here and import this server component, save, go back over here, server component examples. We have apple, banana, car, and bus over here. Let's actually add something over here. Okay, wait, I'm gonna have to change the input. Class name text black. Awesome. So I'm just gonna write bike over here, click submit. It sends a request with bike over here inside the form data. But as you can see, the saved items has not updated. The UI is not up to date. We can actually verify that this item was added inside our database just by opening our db.json file, going over here, and we can see at the end that we have an item by the name of bike. But why is this item not visible over here? The reason for that is this pattern of fetching data inside a component, inside a server component, directly through your APIs, through your database, through your server code is really neat. But the problem is this code only runs once. It does not, or it only runs when this component is being reloaded or re-rendered, right? So right now what happened was we submitted this item to our server. It got saved in our database, but there's no reason for this server component to actually reload or re-render. Therefore, it's not going to actually refetch the latest list of items from our database. And that's sort of a problem because you cannot trigger this fetch from your client if you have a pure server component like this. If we refresh this page, you're going to see that the fifth item, our bike, is also now present because it actually reloaded this component which involved fetching the latest list of items. Now, what we can do is, in order to fix that, what you can do is use something called revalidateTag. So you might notice that we actually attached a tag to this fetch request, and the tag is called items. What you can do within our server actions over here, save item form, the one that is being called from our server component, we can actually go ahead and say revalidate tag, and we can just pass in items over here. And now if we go ahead and add another item over here, I'm just gonna, let's say, call this a microphone, hit submit, and as you can see, the UI did update this time within the server component. It actually refetched the list of items, and it refetched the latest item, and it populated it within the UI, and we can now see it. We can actually add in more items over here, and it's gonna keep updating, right? The reason for this is what revalidate tag does is it's gonna actually force Next to refetch the cached values, or in this case there's no cache, so it's gonna force NextJS to refetch this request over here. And when it does that, it actually gets the latest list of items. The reason I still don't like this pattern is because there's a bunch of real world use cases that sort of get stuck if you try using this within your application. For example, if you wanted to have proper loader states, reset states, things like that, you can actually do them, but the code required to do that gets more and more unintuitive for no reason. It right now in its current state, it actually feels much more intuitive to use a simple client component like this, and instead of calling and creating different API endpoints, you can actually just use server actions to directly call the functions, send whatever data you want to send to your server. And you can of course protect your functions the same way you protect your APIs, just to make sure they're not being compromised. But in general, this pattern of using server actions is super powerful, right? Like this allows developers to simply just write the code for their servers, write the code for your client, simply call the relevant code on the server from your client component. It's a really powerful pattern, makes things super simple, and I'm really excited for this to become live in the stable version of React, Next.js, and that's pretty much it. If you've watched the video so far, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. And do let me know if you found this video helpful in the comment section. And thank you all for watching.